The city never slept, and neither did Dominic Hayes. He stood at the glass wall of his penthouse, 43 floors above Manhattan, watching the lights flicker like dying stars against the night sky. The view was worth $12 million. The silence inside? Priceless and suffocating. His reflection stared back at him. Sharp jaw, tired eyes. A man who had everything and felt nothing. 39 days. That's how long it had been since Elijah Monroe died. 39 days since the only man who ever believed in him was lowered into the ground. And 39 days since Dominic made a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. If anything happens to me, Dom, you take care of her. My niece, Zara. She's got nobody else. Promise me. Dominic had promised. He always kept his promises to Elijah, even the ones that terrified him. But tonight, on the edge of Elijah's death anniversary, the weight of that vow pressed down on Dominic's chest like concrete. He loosened his tie, poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey he wouldn't drink, and let his mind drift to the girl he'd never met but couldn't stop thinking about. Zara Monroe, 18 years old, orphaned, alone, and about to step into a world that would chew her up if he wasn't careful. Dominic had done his research. More than research. He'd quietly monitored her life from the shadows for weeks, the way a guardian angel might if angels wore Tom Ford and had offshore accounts. Anonymous payments toward her overdue rent. A mysterious scholarship that covered her GED exam fees. He'd even made sure the landlord didn't evict her when she was 3 days late last month. She didn't know. She could never know. Not yet, because if she knew he'd been watching, she'd think he pitied her. And pity was the last thing a girl like Zara would accept. He'd seen the fire in her eyes through the grainy photograph Elijah kept in his wallet. A snapshot from her high school graduation. Cap tilted slightly to the side, smile wide but guarded. She looked like someone who had learned to celebrate alone. Dominic understood that look. He'd worn it himself for years. The whiskey sat untouched on the marble countertop as Dominic moved toward the floor-to-ceiling window, his breath fogging the glass. Outside, the world moved at a relentless pace. Yellow cabs honked. Couples laughed on sidewalks. Life continued, indifferent to grief. But inside this penthouse, time had stopped. He thought about Elijah, how the old man used to show up at Dominic's cramped studio apartment years ago with takeout and bad jokes, refusing to let Dominic drown in his own despair. Dominic had been 22, broke, and convinced the world had no place for him. Elijah had been the janitor in the building where Dominic's startup had its sad little office, but he had the wisdom of someone who'd lived 3 lifetimes. You think money's gonna fix that hole in your chest, son? Elijah had asked him one night, after Dominic pulled his first all-nighter coding. It won't. But people will. You just gotta let 'em in. Dominic never let people in. He got rich instead, and now Elijah was gone. And the only person left who mattered to the man was a girl Dominic had never spoken to. A girl who, in 3 hours, would be standing at his door with a suitcase, a heart full of fear, and nowhere else to go. Dominic's phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at the screen. Victoria Ashford. Of course. He didn't answer. He never answered Victoria unless it was absolutely necessary. And tonight, she was the last voice he wanted to hear. She'd been circling him for weeks, her texts growing sharper, her questions more intrusive. You've been distracted, Dominic. What's going on? Are you seeing someone? If only it were that simple. Victoria Ashford was brilliant, cold, and calculating, a venture capitalist who'd been his business partner, his lover, and eventually his mistake. They'd ended things 2 years ago, but she still held a 15% stake in his company and an unhealthy interest in his personal life. She had a way of sensing weakness, and Dominic knew that the moment she found out about Zara, she'd weaponize it. You're bringing an 18-year-old girl into your home. Do you know how that looks? He could already hear her voice, dripping with condescension. But this wasn't about optics. This was about a man who saved his life. Dominic turned away from the window and walked toward the second bedroom, the one he'd spent the last week preparing. New sheets, a desk, books he thought she might like. based on the little Elijah had told him. He'd even bought plants, though he had no idea if she liked plants. He just wanted the room to feel less empty. He wanted her to feel seen. The clock on the wall ticked closer to midnight, closer to the anniversary, closer to her arrival. And Dominic Hayes, a man who controlled boardrooms, crushed competitors, and built empires, felt, for the first time in years, completely out of control. He didn't know if he could save her. He wasn't even sure he could save himself. But he'd made a promise. And tonight, that promise was about to walk through his do-ar and change everything. Dominic's phone buzzed again. This time, he picked it up. Not because it was Victoria. It wasn't. It was a text from his head of security. Cole, she's on her way. ETA, 22 minutes. Driver confirmed pickup from the Bronx. 22 minutes. Dominic set the phone down and exhaled slowly, feeling the air leave his lungs like a confession he wasn't ready to make. He'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, but now that it was here, he felt like a fraud. What did he know about taking care of someone? He'd built a tech empire from nothing. He'd turned lines of code into billions of dollars. He'd negotiated deals that made grown men sweat. But caring for an 18-year-old girl who just lost everything, that required a kind of strength he wasn't sure he possessed. Elijah had been different. Elijah knew how to love people without conditions. Dominic only knew how to transact. He walked back to the second bedroom and stood in the doorway, taking it all in. The bed was made with expensive linens that felt too stiff. The desk was pristine, untouched. The bookshelf was stocked with classics he thought she might appreciate. Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, Maya Angelou. He'd asked his assistant to pick them out, but looking at them now, they felt performative. Am I trying too hard? Dominic ran a hand through his dark hair and cursed under his breath. He wasn't used to second-guessing himself. In business, hesitation was death. But this wasn't business. This was personal. And personal terrified him. His mind drifted back to the last conversation he'd had with Elijah, 3 weeks before the heart attack that stole him from the world. They'd been sitting in a diner in Brooklyn, Elijah's favorite spot. The kind of place where the coffee was burnt and the waitresses called you baby without asking. Dominic had flown in from San Francisco just to have lunch with the old man, something he hadn't done in over a year. Elijah had looked older, grayer, tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. You look good, Dom, Elijah had said, smiling that warm, gap-toothed smile. Rich boy life suits you. Dominic had laughed, uncomfortable. I'm not a boy anymore, Elijah. I'm 29. You'll always be a boy to me. The same scared kid who used to sleep on my couch because he couldn't afford rent. They'd talked about work, about the company, about nothing that mattered. But as Dominic got up to leave, Elijah had grabbed his wrist. Firm, urgent. If something happens to me, you take care of Zara. She's all I got, Dom. She don't know it yet, but she's gonna need you. Dominic had nodded, distracted, already thinking about his next meeting. Nothing's gonna happen to you, old man. You're too stubborn to die. Elijah had smiled, but his eyes were serious. Promise me. I promise. 3 weeks later, Elijah was gone, and Dominic had been drowning in regret ever since. He should have stayed longer. He should have asked more questions. He should have told Elijah what he meant to him, that he was the closest thing to a father Dominic ever had. But he didn't. Well, it was too late. All he had left was the promise. Dominic's phone buzzed again. Another text from Cole. 15 minutes out. 15 minutes until his life changed. Dominic walked into the kitchen and poured the untouched whiskey down the sink. He needed to be clear-headed, focused. He couldn't afford to be the broken man he was when Elijah found him. Not tonight. He thought about Zara, really thought about her, and what she must be feeling right now. sitting in the back of a black town car, watching the city lights blur past, heading toward a stranger's home because she had no other choice. She was probably terrified, probably angry, probably wondering if she'd made a mistake reaching out to him. Dominic had read the email she'd sent him 2 weeks ago, at least 100 times. Subject: you don't know me, but my uncle said I could trust you. Mr. Hayes, my name is Zara Monroe. My uncle, Elijah Monroe, passed away last month. Before he died, he told me that if I ever needed help, I should contact you. I don't know what kind of relationship you two had, and I don't know if this is appropriate, but I don't have anywhere else to go. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for handout. I just need a place to stay while I figure things out. If you can help, I'd appreciate it. If not, I understand. Thank you for your time. Zara. The email had been short, professional, guarded, but Dominic had read between the lines. She was drowning, and she was too proud to say it. He'd responded within an hour. Zara, Elijah was family to me. That makes you family, too. You have a place here for as long as you need it. I'll send a car. Dominic, he hadn't known what else to say. He still didn't. Dominic checked his watch. 10 minutes. He walked to the front door, straightened his shirt, and waited. Outside, the rain began to fall. The knock came exactly 22 minutes later. 3 soft taps, hesitant and careful, like the person on the other side wasn't sure they belonged. Dominic's heart kicked against his ribs. He took a breath, steadied himself, and opened the door. And there she was, Zara Monroe. She stood in the hallway, soaked from the rain, a duffel bag slung over one shoulder, and a backpack clutched in her hands. Her hair was pulled back into a bun, wet curls escaping around her face. Her brown skin glistened with rainwater, and her dark eyes, wide, guarded, exhausted, met his for just a second before looking away. She was beautiful. That was Dominic's first thought, and he hated himself for it. This wasn't about traction. This was about responsibility, about honoring Elijah, about doing the right thing. But standing there, looking at her, this young black woman who had survived more in 18 years than most people endured in a lifetime, Dominic felt something shift inside him. Something he couldn't name. Something dangerous. "Hi," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Zara." Dominic nodded, stepping aside to let her in. "I know. Come in. You're soaking wet." She hesitated, just for a moment, before stepping over the threshold. Her sneakers squeaked against the polished marble floor, and she looked around the penthouse with wide eyes, taking it all in. The floor-to-ceiling windows, the modern furniture, the art on the walls that cost more than most people made in a year. Dominic watched her reaction carefully. He saw the way her shoulders tensed, the way her grip tightened on her bag, the way she seemed to shrink just slightly, as if trying to make herself smaller in a space that was too big for her. She didn't belong here, and knew it. "This is..." Zara trailed off, searching for the right word. "A lot." Dominic almost smiled. "Yeah, it is." An awkward silence stretched between them. Dominic wasn't good at this. Small talk, comfort, connection. He was better with spreadsheets and strategy, but he had to try. "Let me take your bag," he offered, reaching for the duffel. Zara pulled it back instinctively, her eyes flashing with something defensive. "I got it." Dominic raised his hands in surrender. "Okay, no problem." She softened slightly, realizing how sharp she'd sounded. "Sorry, I'm not used to people helping me." "I get it," Dominic said. He did. He gestured toward the hallway. "Your room's this way. You can get changed, dry off, and we can talk. Or not talk. Whatever you need." Zara nodded and followed him down the hall, her wet sneakers leaving faint prints on the floor. Dominic opened the door to the guest room and stepped aside, letting her see it for the first time. She froze. Her eyes moved slowly across the room. The bed, the desk, the books, the plants. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. She just stood there, staring, her lips pressed together, like she was trying not to cry. "This is for me?" she finally asked, her voice tight. "Yeah," Dominic said. "I wasn't sure what you liked, so I tried to cover the basics. If there's anything you need, just let me know." Zara set her bag down on the floor and walked over to the bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines. She stopped at Beloved by Toni Morrison and pulled it out, holding it like it was something precious. "My mom used to read this to me," she said softly, "before she died." Dominic's chest tightened. "I'm sorry." Zara shook her head, blinking rapidly. "It's fine. It was a long time ago." But Dominic knew it wasn't fine. Grief didn't have an expiration date. She set the book back on the shelf and turned to face him, her arms crossed over her chest like armor. "Why are you doing this?" Dominic blinked. "What do you mean?" "This," she gestured around the room. "Letting me stay here. You don't even know me." "I knew Elijah," Dominic said simply, "and he loved you. That's enough." Zara's jaw tightened. "Though this is about him, not me. It's about both of you," Dominic said carefully. "Elijah saved my life, and now I'm trying to honor that by making sure you're okay." Zara studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face for something. Truth, maybe, or deception. Dominic held her gaze, refusing to look away. Finally, she nodded. Okay, Dominic echoed. Another silence. This one felt heavier. Zara cleared her throat. "I appreciate this, really, but I'm not staying long. Just until I can get back on my feet. A few weeks, maybe a month. I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden," Dominic said firmly. "You don't know that yet," Zara shot back, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. Dominic almost laughed. "Fair enough." She turned back to the room, her shoulders relaxing just slightly. "It's my first time in a place like this. Please, be gentle with me." The words hit Dominic harder than they should have. There was something vulnerable in the way she said it, something raw and honest that made his chest ache. "I will," he promised. And he meant it. Zara nodded, satisfied, and picked up her bag. "I'm gonna get changed." "Take your time," Dominic said, stepping back into the hallway. "I'll be in the kitchen if you need anything." He closed the door behind him and leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. 39 days. That's how long it had been since Elijah died. And in one night, everything had changed. Before we go any further, let me stop right here and talk to you directly. Welcome back to Melanin Stories, Hub with Marcus. If you're new here, let me tell you what you just walked into. This isn't just another love story. This isn't just another billionaire romance where everything's easy and nothing hurts. This is about real people. Flawed people. Broken people. People who are trying to heal in a world that keeps telling them they don't deserve it. This is about Zara, a young black woman who lost everything and had to rebuild herself from the ground up. And this is about Dominic, a white man who built an empire but forgot how to feel. Two people who were never supposed to meet. Two people who come from completely different worlds. But grief brought them together. And love, well, love is gonna test them in ways they never saw coming. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. "Marcus, why you gotta make this about race?" Because it is about race. It's about identity. It's about power. It's about what happens when a black girl steps into a world that wasn't built for her. It's about what happens when a white man realizes that protecting someone means confronting his own privilege. And yeah, it's gonna get uncomfortable, but the best stories do. So if you're still with me, I need you to do something right now. I need you to hit that subscribe button. Not later, not after the video, right now, because this story is going to take you places, and you're going to want to see how it ends. Trust me. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever felt out of place in someone else's world. Tell me if you've ever had to choose between pride and survival. And while you're at it, hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because stories like this, they matter. They heal. They remind us that we're not alone. All right, let's get back to it. Now I could drag this story out. I could spend hours telling you every little detail about how Zara and Dominic danced around each other for weeks. But I'm not gonna do that, because this ain't about the slow burn for the sake of drama. This is about getting to the truth. The heart, the moment when everything changes. So I'm gonna move us through this efficiently. I'm gonna take you to the moments that matter. The moments that'll make you feel something. The moments that'll make you believe in love again, even if you thought you were done with it. Because here's the thing. Zara and Dominic, they didn't fall in love overnight. Love doesn't work like that. But they fell into trust. And trust, that's harder. That's scarier. That's the foundation that everything else is built on. Let me take you there. Let me show you what happened when two people decided to stop running from their pain and start facing it together. But before I do, I gotta warn you. This story's gonna hit you. It's gonna make you laugh. It's gonna make you cry. And by the end of it, it's gonna make you believe that love, real love, is worth fighting for. Even when the world's against you. Even when people judge you. Even when you're scared out of your mind. So buckle up. We're about to go deep. 3 days after Zara moved into the penthouse, Dominic got the call he'd been dreading. We need to talk. Victoria Ashford's voice was sharp, clipped, and laced with the kind of cold authority that made people straighten their spines without thinking. Dominic had been avoiding her calls for over a week, but he knew she wouldn't let it slide forever. I'm busy, Dominic said, pouring himself coffee in the kitchen. It was early, 6 in the morning, and Zara was still asleep in her room. The penthouse was quiet, peaceful, and Dominic wanted to keep it that way. You're always busy, Victoria shot back. But this can't wait. I'm coming over. No, excuse me? Dominic set the coffee mug down harder than he intended. I said, no, Victoria. This isn't a good time. There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Victoria spoke again, her voice was dangerously calm. What's going on, Dominic? You've been avoiding me for weeks. You've missed 2 board meetings. You're distracted. And now you're telling me I can't come to your apartment? I'm handling some personal matters, Dominic said carefully. Personal matters? Victoria repeated, her tone dripping with skepticism. Does this have anything to do with the girl? Dominic's blood went cold. What? Girl? Don't play dumb with me. My assistant saw the driver logs. You sent a car to the Bronx 2 weeks ago. Picked up an 18-year-old. She's living with you now, isn't she? Dominic clenched his jaw. Of course, Victoria had access to the driver logs. She had access to everything. She made sure of it. It's none of your business, Dominic said flatly. Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. None of my business? Dominic, I own 15% of your company. Everything you do is my business, especially when it involves you playing house with a teenage girl. She's not. Dominic stopped himself, forcing his voice to stay calm. She's the niece of a friend. She needed help. That's it. A friend, Victoria said slowly. You mean that janitor you used to talk about? Elijah something? Elijah Monroe, Dominic said, his voice tight. And yeah, he died last month. I'm honoring a promise I made to him. How noble, Victoria said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. But you know how this looks, don't you? A 29-year-old billionaire taking in a teenage girl. The media would have a field day. I don't care what the media thinks. You should, Victoria snapped. Because if this gets out, it's not just your reputation on the line. It's the company's. It's mine. And I'm not about to let you tank everything we've built because you're having some kind of midlife crisis. Dominic's hands curled into fists. This conversation is over. No, it's not. I'm coming over tonight, 7 o'clock. And you're going to explain to me exactly what's going on. Victoria, 7 o'clock, Dominic. Don't make me use my key. The line went dead. Dominic stood there, staring at his phone, rage simmering beneath his skin. Victoria didn't have a key. He'd changed the locks after they broke up. But the threat was clear. She wasn't going to let this go. He set the phone down and ran a hand through his hair, trying to calm the storm building inside him. He needed to think, needed to figure out how to handle this before it got out of control. Is everything okay? Dominic spun around. Zara stood in the doorway, wearing an oversized hoodie and sweatpants, her hair loose and wild around her face. She looked small, worried. Yeah, Dominic lied. Everything's fine. Zara didn't look convinced. Who was that? Just a business partner. Nothing to worry about. She studied him for a moment, her dark eyes searching his face. You're a terrible liar. Dominic almost smiled. So, I've been told. Zara walked over to the counter and poured herself a glass of water, her movements slow and deliberate. If me being here is causing problems for you, I can leave. No, Dominic said quickly. You're not going anywhere. If Zara, Dominic's voice was firm. You're not the problem. Victoria is. And I'll handle her? Zara took a sip of water, her expression unreadable. Who is she? Dominic hesitated. An ex and a business partner. It's complicated. Sounds like it, Zara said softly. They stood there in silence for a moment, the tension between them thick but not uncomfortable. Finally, Zara set the glass down and looked at him. Thank you for letting me stay, for not giving up on me. Dominic's chest tightened. You don't have to thank me. Yeah, Zara said, a small smile tugging at her lips. I do. She turned and walked back toward her room, leaving Dominic alone in the kitchen. And as he stood there, watching her go, he realized something that scared him more than Victoria ever could. He wasn't just protecting Zara because of Elijah. He was protecting her because he was starting to care. And that changed everything. Outside, storm clouds gathered over the city. And somewhere across town, Victoria Ashford was already planning her next move. Zara Monroe had learned how to disappear long before she ever stepped foot in Dominic Hayes's penthouse. It was a survival skill she'd picked up young. So young she couldn't remember a time when she didn't know how to make herself small, quiet, invisible. In foster homes, invisibility kept you safe. In shelters, it kept you from being noticed by the wrong people. On the streets, it kept you alive. But now, sitting in a bedroom that cost more than everything she'd ever owned combined, Zara realized that disappearing wasn't going to work anymore. Dominic saw her, and that terrified her. She lay on the bed, her bed, though it still felt strange to think of it that way, and stared at the ceiling, tracing the lines of the recessed lighting with her eyes. The sheets were soft. Too soft. The kind of soft that made her feel guilty, like she didn't deserve it. Her mind drifted back to the Bronx. to the cramped studio apartment she'd been sharing with 2 other girls, both of them just as broke and desperate as she was. The walls had been thin, the heat barely worked, and every night she'd fallen asleep to the sound of sirens and shouting and the hum of the city that never cared if you lived or died. But it had been hers. She'd paid for it, worked 3 jobs to keep the rent current. And even though it was small and cold and falling apart, it had belonged to her. Here in Dominic's world, nothing belonged to her. Not the bed, not the books, not the safety. It was all borrowed, temporary, and Zara knew better than anyone that temporary things didn't last. She rolled over and grabbed her phone from the nightstand, checking the time. 7:43 in the morning. She'd been awake since 5, too anxious to sleep, too restless to stay still. There was a text from her friend Nia, sent late last night. "Girl, you good. You just disappeared. Hit me back." Zara stared at the message for a long moment before typing a response. "I'm fine. Staying with a friend of my uncle's for a bit. I'll explain later." She hit send and tossed the phone onto the bed. A friend of my uncle's. That's what Dominic was, technically. But it felt like a lie, because friends didn't look at you the way Dominic had looked at her last night in the kitchen, like he was trying to figure out a puzzle he didn't have all the pieces to. Zara got up and walked over to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to see the city stretched out below her. From up here, everything looked clean, organized, beautiful, but Zara knew better. She knew what the city looked like from the ground. She knew the dirt, the chaos, the cruelty. You couldn't scrub that away with money. Her thoughts drifted to her parents, to the accident that had stolen them from her when she was 16, to the way her whole life had collapsed in a single moment. She'd been at school when it happened. Chemistry. Mrs. Davis had called her into the hallway, her face pale and tight, and told her there'd been an accident, that her parents were gone, that she needed to come to the hospital. But by the time Zara got there, it was already over. Her mother, Simone, warm and strong and full of laughter, had died on impact. Her father, Darnell, quiet and steady and endlessly kind, had held on for 2 hours before slipping away. And just like that, Zara was alone. No siblings, no grandparents, just her uncle Elijah, who lived 3 states away and worked long hours as a maintenance man. Elijah had tried. He really had. He'd flown out for the funeral, held her while she cried, promised he'd figure something out. But he was barely scraping by himself, and taking in a teenage girl wasn't something he could afford. So Zara had been placed in foster care, and that's where she'd learned how to disappear. She'd bounced between 3 different homes in 2 years. Some were fine. Some were worse. No nay of them felt like home. And the moment she turned 18, she'd aged out of the system and been left to fend for herself. No safety net, no backup plan, just survival. She'd worked at a diner, a grocery store, a call center, whatever would pay her enough to keep a roof over her head. She'd enrolled in community college, determined to get her degree, to make something of herself, to prove that she was more than her circumstances. But it was hard, so hard, and some days she wasn't sure she was going to make it. Then Uncle Elijah died. Heart attack. Sudden, brutal, no warning. Zara had been at work when she got the call. She'd collapsed in the break room, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe, because Elijah had been the last connection she had to her parents, the last person who remembered, the last person who loved her. Now he was gone too. But before he died, he'd left her something. A letter. And in that letter, he'd written about Dominic Hayes. "If anything happens to me, baby girl, you call this man. His name is Dominic. I helped him once, a long time ago, and he owes me. He's a good man, even if he don't always show it. He'll take care of you. I made him promise." Zara had read that letter 100 times, trying to decide if she should reach out. She didn't want Charity didn't want to be someone's burden, but she also didn't have any other options. So she'd sent the email, and Dominic had responded. And now, here she was, in a penthouse, with a man she didn't know, trying to figure out if she'd made the right choice. There was a knock on the door. Zara turned, pulling the curtain closed. "Yeah, it's me," Dominic's voice came through the door. "I made breakfast. If you're hungry." Zara hesitated. "I'll be out in a minute." "Take your time." She heard his footsteps retreat down the hallway, and she let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. He made breakfast. It was such a small thing, but it felt enormous. Zara changed quickly, pulling on jeans and a t-shirt, and made her way to the kitchen. The smell of coffee and eggs hit her the moment she stepped into the room, and her stomach growled in response. Dominic was standing at the stove, flipping an omelet with the kind of focus most people reserved for surgery. He looked up when she walked in and gave her a small smile. "Hope you like eggs," he said. "I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage breakfast." Zara sat down at the counter. "Eggs are good." Dominic slid the omelet onto a plate and set it in front of her, along with toast and a cup of coffee. "Sugar and cream are on the counter, if you want them." "Black's fine," Zara said. Dominic nodded and leaned against the counter, watching her take the first bite. Zara chewed slowly, acutely aware of his gaze. "It's good," she said. "Don't lie." Zara smiled despite herself. "Okay, it's a little dry, but it's still good." Dominic laughed, a real, genuine laugh, and the sound caught Zara off guard. It was warm, human, not at all what she'd expected from a billionaire. "I'll work on it," Dominic said. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the tension from the night before melting away just slightly. Finally, Zara set her fork down and looked at him. "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah?" "Why did Uncle Elijah help you?" Dominic's expression shifted. The lightness faded, replaced by something heavier. He set his coffee mug down and crossed his arms. "I was in a bad place when I met him," Dominic said quietly. 22. Broke. Depressed. I just dropped out of grad school, and my startup was falling apart. I was living in this terrible apartment, barely eating, barely sleeping. I thought about ending it more than once. Zara's chest tightened. "Your uncle worked in my building," Dominic continued. "He was the maintenance guy. And one night, he found me on the roof. I wasn't planning to jump, but I was thinking about it. And he sat with me for hours, just talked, told me stories about his life. About your mom. About you." Zara blinked back tears. "He gave me his number," Dominic said. "Told me to call him if I ever felt like that again. And I did. A lot. He became a father figure, I guess. He believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. He loaned me money to keep my company afloat. He checked in on me. He saved my life." Dominic's voice cracked, just slightly, and he looked away. "I owed him everything," Dominic said, "and I never got the chance to pay him back. So this, you being here, this is the least I can do." Zara wiped at her eyes, her throat tight. "He never told me he wouldn't," Dominic said. That wasn't his style. They sat there in silence, both of them grieving the same man in different ways. Finally, Zara spoke. "Thank you for telling me." Dominic nodded. "Thank you for letting me." And in that moment, something shifted between them. A wall came down, just a little, but enough. Zara didn't feel quite so alone anymore. And Dominic didn't feel quite so guilty. Dominic Hayes hadn't always been cold. There was a time, years ago, when he'd been open, hopeful, the kind of person who believed that hard work and good intentions could change the world. But the world had taught him otherwise. It had taught him that vulnerability was a weakness, that trust was a liability, that the only person you could count on was yourself. So he'd built walls, high ones, thick ones, walls that kept people out and kept him safe. And then Elijah Monroe had come along and torn them all down. Dominic sat in his home office now, staring at the framed photo on his desk. It was old, faded, taken nearly 7 years ago. In it, Dominic and Elijah stood side by side outside a rundown building in Brooklyn, both of them grinning like idiots. It had been the day Dominic's company secured its first major investor, the day everything changed. Elijah had insisted they celebrate with cheap beer and pizza, and they'd sat on the curb outside that building for hours, talking about the future. "You're gonna be somebody, Dom," Elijah had said, clapping him on the back. "I can feel it." Dominic had laughed it off at the time, but Elijah had been right. Within 3 years, Dominic's company had exploded. He'd developed a software platform that revolutionized data security, and tech giants had come calling. Offers poured in. Investors lined up, and suddenly, Dominic was worth more money than he knew what to do with. But success came with a price. The more he climbed, the lonelier it got. Friends disappeared. Relationships crumbled. Everyone wanted something from him. Money, connections, access. No one just wanted him. Except Elijah. Elijah had never asked for anything. He'd never wanted Dominic's nay, or his influence. He just wanted to grab lunch every few months and hear how Dominic was doing. And Dominic, like an idiot, had let that slip away. He'd gotten too busy, too important, too wrapped up in his own world to make time for the man who'd saved his life. And now Elijah was gone. Dominic closed his eyes, the guilt pressing down on him like a weight he couldn't lift. He should have been there, should have visited more, should have told Elijah what he meant to him. But he didn't, and now all he had left was a promise, and a girl who looked at him like he was some kind of savior when really he was just trying not to drown. There was a soft knock on the office door. "Come in," Dominic said, quickly wiping at his eyes. The door opened, and Zara stepped inside, hesitant. "Sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt." "You're not," Dominic said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "What's up?" Zara sat down, her hands folded in her lap. "I was thinking, I need to find a job. I can't just sit around here doing nothing." Dominic frowned. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to," Zara interrupted gently. "But I want to. I need to feel like I'm contributing. Like I'm not just taking." Dominic studied her for a moment. She was proud, stubborn, and he respected the hell out of that. "Okay," he said. "What kind of work are you looking for?" Zara shrugged. "Anything, really. Retail. Food service. I've done it all before." Dominic leaned back in his chair, thinking, what if I could get you something here? In the building. There's a cafe on the ground floor. I know the owner. Zara's eyes narrowed. "You're not gonna, pay him to hire me, are you?" Dominic held up his hands. "No, I'll just put in a good word. The rest is up to you." Zara considered this, then nodded. "Okay. Yeah, that'd be cool. I'll make a call," Dominic said. "Thank you." They sat in silence for a moment, and Dominic found himself studying her. The way she sat, the way she spoke, the quiet strength she carried. She reminded him of Elijah, and that made his chest ache. "Can I ask you a thing?" Dominic said. "Sure. What do you want? Long term, I mean. What's the goal?" Zara thought about it. "I want to finish school, get my degree, maybe become a social worker. He LP kids who went through what I went through." Dominic nodded, slowly. "That's a good goal." "Yeah," Zara said softly. "I just don't know if I can afford it." "You can," Dominic said. I'll help. Zara's head snapped up. I told you Nah, I know, Dominic said firmly. You're not a charity case. But Elijah would have wanted me to help you. And I want to help you. So let me. Zara stared at him, her jaw tight, her eyes wet. Finally, she nodded. Okay, but I'm paying you back. Someday. Dominic smiled. Deal? And just like that, another wall came down. It happened on a Thursday night, 2 weeks after Zara moved in. Dominic had been working late in his office, buried in emails and contracts, when he heard music coming from the living room. Soft, soulful, Erica Badu. He got up and walked toward the sound, finding Zara curled up on the couch with a blanket, a mug of tea in her hands, staring out at the city lights. Can't sleep? Dominic asked. Zara looked over at him and shook her head. Not really. You? Too much work, Dominic admitted. Zara gestured to the other end of the couch. You can sit, if you want. Dominic hesitated, then sat down, keeping a respectful distance. They sat in silence for a while, just listening to the music. Finally, Zara spoke. Do you ever feel like you don't belong anywhere? Dominic looked at her. Yeah, all the time. Zara nodded, her gaze still fixed on the window. I thought it'd get easier, being here, having a place to stay, but it's like I still feel out of place, like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not. You're not pretending, Dominic said quietly. You belong here, as much as anyone. Zara laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. Do I? I mean, look at this place. Look at your life. I'm just some girl from the Bronx who got lucky. You didn't get lucky, Dominic said firmly. You survived. That takes strength. And you're here because you deserve to be. Zara turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face. You really believe that? Yeah, Dominic said. I do. Something passed between them in that moment. An understanding, a connection, a recognition of shared pain. Can I tell you something? Zara asked. Anything. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm scared that I'm gonna mess this up, that I'm gonna do something wrong, and you're gonna regret letting me stay. Dominic's chest tightened. You're not gonna mess anything up. You don't know that. I do, Dominic said, because I've seen you, the way you fight, the way you show up. You're stronger than you think, Zara. Zara's eyes filled with tears, and she looked away quickly, wiping at them with the back of her hand. Sorry, I don't cry in front of people. It's okay, Dominic said softly. You don't have to be strong all the time. Zara let out a shaky breath and leaned back against the couch, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. Uncle Elijah used to say that. He'd tell me it was okay to fall apart sometimes. That crying didn't make me weak. He was right, Dominic said. They sat there for a while longer, the music filling the space between them. And for the first time since Elijah died, Dominic didn't feel quite so alone. Neither did Zara. Over the next few weeks, something shifted between Dominic and Zara. Wasn't dramatic. Wasn't sudden. It was slow, gradual, like ice melting under the sun. They started having breakfast together, talking more, sharing stories. Zara told him about her parents, about her mother's love for old Motown records, and her father's terrible jokes, about the life she'd lost and the memories she clung to. Dominic told her about his own family, or lack thereof, about parents who'd been more interested in their careers than their son, about growing up lonely in a house full of expensive things and empty rooms. They found common ground in their brokenness, and slowly, carefully, they started to heal. One night, Dominic came home to find Zara in the kitchen, cooking. The smell hit him the moment he walked through the door. Spices, garlic, something rich and warm, and utterly unfamiliar. "What is that?" Dominic asked, setting his briefcase down. Zara looked over her shoulder and grinned. "Jollof rice, my mom's recipe." "Well, sort of. I'm winging it a little." Dominic walked over to the stove and peered into the pot. "It smells incredible." "Wait till you taste it," Zara said. "I used to make this all the time with my mom. It was our thing." Dominic watched her cook, the way her hands moved with confidence, the way her face softened when she talked about her mother. "Can I help?" he asked. Zara raised an eyebrow. "You know how to cook?" "I can learn." She laughed and handed him a wooden spoon. "Okay. Stir. Slowly. Don't let it burn." Dominic did as he was told, and they worked side by side in comfortable silence. When the food was ready, they sat at the counter and ate together, and Dominic couldn't remember the last time a meal had tasted this good. "This is amazing," he said. Zara beamed. "Told you." They talked late into the night, laughing and teasing and forgetting, for just a little while, about everything that hurt. And when Zara finally went to bed, Dominic sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the empty pot, and realized something that scared him. He didn't want her to leave. A few days later, Dominic surprised Zara with something he'd been working on in secret. He found her in her room, studying, and knocked on the door. "Hey," he said, "can you come with me for a second?" Zara looked up, curious. "Where?" "You'll see." She followed him down the hallway to a room she'd never been in, a small space at the end of the hall that had been locked since she'd arrived. Dominic opened the door and stepped aside. Zara walked in and froze. The room had been transformed. There was a small table in the center, covered with a white cloth. On it sat a framed photo of her parents, one she recognized from her childhood, surrounded by flowers. Candles flickered softly, casting warm light across the space. Was a memorial, a sacred space, a place to remember. Zara's hand flew to her mouth, and tears spilled down her cheeks. "I thought you might want somewhere to feel close to them," Dominic said quietly. Zara couldn't speak. She just stood there, staring at the photo of her parents, sobbing. Dominic stepped forward, hesitant. "If it's too much, I can..." Zara turned and threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. Dominic froze for a moment, then slowly, carefully, wrapped his arms around her and held her while she cried. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." Dominic closed his eyes and rested his chin on top of her head. And in that moment, everything changed. The problem with getting close to someone is that eventually you have to face what that closine SS means. For Dominic, it meant confronting feelings he'd spent years burying. For Zara, it meant risking her heart again after losing everyone she'd ever loved. And neither of them was ready for it. It started with small things, lingering glances, hands brushing when they passed each other coffee, the way Dominic's voice softened when he said her name, the way Zara smiled when he walked into a room. But they both knew it was dangerous. Dominic was 11 years older. He was her guardian, in a sense, and the power imbalance was real, even if neither of them wanted to admit it. One night, after another late conversation on the couch, Zara looked at him and asked the question that had been burning between them for weeks. "Do you ever think about us?" Dominic's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean," Zara said softly. Dominic looked away. "Zara!" "It's okay," she said quickly, "if you don't feel the same way. I needed to know." Dominic closed his eyes, his hands clenched into fists. "It's not that I don't feel it. I do. But what?" "But you're 18, Dominic said, his voice strained. "And I'm supposed to protect you, not complicate your life." Zara's jaw tightened. "Stop treating me like a kid, Dominic. I've been taking care of myself for years." "I know that," Dominic said. "But us. It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because I don't want to hurt you. Dominic said, his voice breaking. And I'm terrified. That's exactly what I'll do. Zara stared at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. You don't get to decide what's good for me. I do. I know, Dominic whispered. But I can't. Can't what? Zara challenged. Can't let yourself be happy? Can't let someone in? Dominic didn't answer. Zara stood up, her voice shaking. You know what? Forget it. I shouldn't have said anything. She turned to leave, but Dominic grabbed her wrist gently. Wait! Zara stopped, but she didn't look at him. I care about you, Dominic said quietly. More than I should. More than I know how to handle. And that scares me. Zara finally looked at him, and the vulnerability in his eyes broke her. It scares me too, she whispered. They stood there, inches apart, the air between them charged with everything they weren't saying. And then Dominic did something he'd been trying not to do for weeks. He kissed her. It was soft, tentative, a question, not a demand. And Zara kissed him back. When they finally pulled away, both of them were breathless. We can't do this, Dominic said, even as his hands stayed on her waist. I know, Zara whispered, but neither of them let go. Victoria Ashford showed up exactly when she said she would. 7 o'clock. On the dot. Dominic had been dreading this moment all day, and when the doorman called up to announce her arrival, his stomach dropped. Zara were here, room, studying. Dominic had told her to stay there, no matter what. He opened the door, and Victoria swept in like she owned the place. She was impeccably dressed, as always. Sharp blazer, designer heels, blonde hair pulled back into a severe bun. Her eyes scanned the penthouse with calculated precision. Nice to see you too, Dominic, she said dryly. What do you want, Victoria? She turned to face him, her arms crossed. I want to know what the hell you're doing. I told you I'm helping someone, an 18-year-old girl, Victoria said, her voice dripping with accusation. Do you have any idea how this looks? I don't care how it looks. Victoria laughed bitterly. Of course you don't. Because you never think about consequences, do you? You just do whatever you want, and expect the rest of us to clean up the mess. Dominic's jaw tightened. This has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me, Victoria snapped. I have a stake in your company. And if this blows up, it affects me too. Nothing's going to blow up. You don't know that. Before Dominic could respond, Zara's door opened. She stepped into the hallway, her expression calm but guarded. Victoria's eyes locked onto her immediately, and Dominic saw the calculation in her gaze. You must be Zara, Victoria said, her voice sickeningly sweet. Zara nodded. And you're Victoria? Dominic's told you about me, Victoria said, smiling. How nice. Not really, Zara said coolly. I just figured it out. Victoria's smile faltered. Dominic stepped between them. Zara, you don't have to. It's fine, Zara said, her eyes never leaving Victoria. I can handle myself. Victoria studied her for a long moment, then laughed softly. Well, aren't you confident? I have to be, Zara said. I've had to fight for everything I have. Victoria's expression hardened. Is that what you think you're doing here? Fighting. I think I'm surviving, Zara said, just like I always have. Victoria turned to Dominic. She's smart. I'll give you that. But this is a mistake, Dominic, and you know it. Get out, Dominic said quietly. Victoria blinked. Excuse me? I said get out, Dominic repeated, his voice firm. This conversation is over. Victoria stared him, shocked. Then her expression twisted into something cold and dangerous. Fine, she said. But don't say I didn't warn you. She turned on her heel and walked out, slamming the door behind her. Dominic stood there, his hands shaking, his heart pounding. Zara walked over to him and placed a hand on his arm. You okay? She asked softly. Dominic looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, he told the truth. No, he said, but I will be. Zara nodded. We both will. And in that moment, Dominic knew he'd made his choice. He chose her. The days after Victoria's visit were tense. Dominic waited for the fallout, the phone calls, the threats, the media storm. But nothing came. Victoria had gone silent and scared him more than anything. But he didn't have time to worry about it, because something more important was happening. He and Zara were building something real. They talked more, laughed more, let their guards down. One night, they sat on the balcony, wrapped in blankets, watching the city lights. Do you ever regret it? Zara asked. Letting me stay? Dominic looked at her, surprised. Never, even with all the complications. Especially with the complications, Dominic said. You've made my life better, Zara. In ways I didn't think were possible. Zara smiled, her eyes soft. You've made mine better, too. They sat in comfortable silence, and Dominic realized something. He wasn't afraid anymore. I want to try, he said suddenly. Zara turned to him. Try what? This, Dominic said, gesturing between them. Us. I know it's complicated. I know people will judge, but I don't care. I want to be with you. Zara's breath hitched. Dominic, I'm not saying it'll be easy, Dominic continued, but I'm saying it'll be worth it. You're worth it? Tears filled Zara's eyes. You really mean that? Yeah? Dominic said. I do. Zara leaned forward and kissed him, slow and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled away, both of them were smiling. Okay, Zara whispered. Let's try. 3 months later, Dominic and Zara attended their first public event together. It was a charity gala, one Dominic couldn't avoid. Zara wore a simple black dress that made her look stunning. Dominic wore a tux and couldn't stop staring at her. When they walked into the ballroom, heads turned. Whispers followed them. But Dominic didn't chair. He held Zara's hand and didn't let go. Victoria was there, of course. She watched them from across the room, her expression unreadable. At one point, she approached. Dominic, she said coolly. Zara, Victoria, Dominic replied. You two make quite the pair, Victoria said, her tone laced with something sharp. We do, Zara said confidently. Victoria studied her, then smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Well, good luck. She walked away, and Dominic exhaled. That wasn't so bad, Zara said. Dominic squeezed her hand. No, it wasn't. They spent the rest of the night together, dancing, laughing, ignoring the stares. And when they left, hand in hand, Dominic knew they'd made it through the hardest part. 5 years later, Zara stood on a stage, wearing a cap and gown, holding her master's degree in social work. Dominic sat in the front row, tears streaming down his face, clapping louder than anyone. Next to him sat their daughter, Maya, 3 years old, with her mother's brown skin and her father's green eyes, giggling as she waved at Zara. When Zara walked off the stage, she ran straight to them, scooping Maya into her arms and kissing Dominic. We did it, she whispered. No, Dominic said, smiling through his tears. You did it? That night, they sat together as a family, and Zara looked at Dominic with love in her eyes. Thank you, she said, for being gentle with me. Dominic kissed her forehead. Thank you for teaching me how love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up broken and choosing to heal together. It's about crossing divides, race, class, pain, and building something beautiful on the other side. Zara and Dominic's story teaches us that trust is built slowly, that vulnerability is strength, that love requires courage, and that no matter where you come from, you deserve to be loved. If this story moved you, don't just walk away. Drop a comment right now and tell me what hit you the hardest. Share this with someone who needs to hear that healing is possible. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Melanin Stories Hub with Marcus. We're building something special here. A community that believes in second chances, real love, and the power of storytelling to change lives. Hit that like button. Turn on notifications. Because we're just getting started. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. This is Marcus, reminding you that your story isn't over. It's just beginning.